What if I told you that every single day you're living someone else's life? Not intentionally, not consciously, but because you've handed over the remote control of your existence to complete strangers, to people whose opinions shouldn't matter, to voices that have no business dictating your choices. Right now, at this very moment, there are decisions you're not making, words you're not speaking, dreams you're not pursuing, and a version of yourself you're not becoming, all because you're terrified of what other people might think. The average person checks their phone four times per day, posts something on social media, and then obsessively refreshes to see how many likes, comments, or reactions they get. They're literally living for external validation, measuring their self-worth by the approval of people they've never met. But here's the brutal truth most people will never face. Caring about what others think of you is the fastest way to kill your potential, destroy your authenticity, and guarantee a life of mediocrity. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to break free from this mental prison. You're going to learn why your brain is wired to seek approval, how this programming is sabotaging every area of your life, and, most importantly, the step-by-step system to become completely immune to other people's opinions. By the end of this, you won't just understand the theory, you'll have the tools to transform into someone who lives entirely on their own terms. Chapter 1. The brutal reality is that most people are walking around as prisoners in their own lives, and they don't even know it. They think they're making choices, but in reality, every decision they make is filtered through one devastating question. What will people think? This invisible cage is more powerful than any physical prison because the bars are made of fear and the locks are forged from a desperate need for approval that was programmed into you before you could even walk. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. There's someone right now who has a brilliant business idea, something that could change their entire financial future. But they're not pursuing it because they're afraid their friends might think it's stupid. There's someone who wants to end a toxic relationship, but they stay because they're worried about what their family will say. There's someone who has incredible talent, maybe in music, art, or writing, but they never share it with the world because they're paralyzed by the fear of criticism. This isn't just about missing opportunities. This is about the slow, painful death of your authentic self. Every time you choose safety over truth, comfort over growth, approval over authenticity, you're killing a piece of who you're meant to be. You're trading your potential for the illusion of acceptance, and the cost is everything that makes life worth living. The science behind this is devastating. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA shows that social rejection activates the same pain centers in your brain as physical injury. When someone disapproves of you, your brain literally interprets it as a threat to your survival. This is why the fear of judgment feels so overwhelming, why it can paralyze you completely, why it can make rational, intelligent people make completely irrational decisions. But here's what they don't tell you about this research. This reaction is based on ancient programming that is completely obsolete in the modern world. Your brain evolved in small tribes where rejection meant death. If the group cast you out, you died alone in the wilderness. So your subconscious developed an obsession with group approval as a survival mechanism. The problem is, we're no longer living in tribes of 50 people where survival depends on everyone liking you. We're living in a world of billions where you can thrive without the approval of anyone. Yet your brain is still running the same prehistoric software, treating every potential criticism like a life or death situation. This is why you get anxiety when posting something on social media. This is why your heart races when you have to speak up in a meeting. This is why you lose sleep over what someone said about you. Your brain is responding to imaginary threats with real fear, and it's destroying your ability to live freely. The most insidious part of this programming is how it disguises itself as rationality. Your mind will create seemingly logical reasons to avoid taking risks, to stay quiet, to play it safe. It will tell you that you're being practical, that you're being smart, that you're protecting yourself. But in reality, you're just being controlled by an obsolete fear response that has no place in your modern life. Think about the people you admire most. The entrepreneurs, the artists, the leaders, the innovators. What do they all have in common? They stopped caring about what other people think. They decided that their vision, their goals, their authentic expression was more important than universal approval. They understood that you cannot live an extraordinary life while being addicted to ordinary opinions. Steve Jobs was criticized relentlessly for his unconventional ideas. Oprah was told she was too emotional for television. J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers before Harry Potter was accepted. Every single person who has ever achieved anything significant has faced criticism, rejection, and disapproval. The difference between them and everyone else wasn't that they were immune to judgment. It was that they valued their mission more than they feared criticism. This is the fundamental choice you have to make. Do you want to live for yourself or for other people? Do you want to be the author of your own story or let others write it for you? Do you want to discover what you're truly capable of? Or do you want to spend your life playing it safe and wondering what could have been? Chapter 2. The approval addiction that's controlling your life didn't happen overnight. It was carefully installed in your mind through years of conditioning, reward systems, and social programming that taught you to value other people's opinions more than your own intuition. Understanding how this happened is the first step to breaking free, because you can't fix what you don't understand. It starts in childhood, where your survival literally depends on adult approval. When you're a child, pleasing your parents, teachers, and authority figures is actually a survival strategy. Their approval means safety, food, shelter, love. Their disapproval means potential abandonment, punishment, or rejection. So your young brain develops neural pathways that associate approval with safety and disapproval with danger. The problem is that these pathways become hardwired. Even as an adult, when your survival no longer depends on anyone's approval, your brain continues to operate from this childhood programming. The teacher's disapproval that once meant genuine consequences now becomes your boss's opinion. The parent's approval that once meant safety now becomes your friend's validation. You're still running the same software, but the operating system of your life has completely changed. Social media has turned this natural tendency into an addiction. Every like, comment, share, and reaction triggers a small hit of dopamine in your brain. It's the same neurochemical reward that drives gambling addiction, drug addiction, and other compulsive behaviors. You post something, get positive feedback, feel good, and then need more. You've essentially trained your brain to depend on external validation for internal happiness. But the truly destructive part isn't just that you want approval. It's that you've started to believe that approval equals truth. If people like what you do, you think it's good. If they don't, you think it's bad. You've outsourced your own judgment to the crowd, and crowds are notoriously unreliable. The same crowd that would have booed the Beatles off stage in their early days later considered them the greatest band of all time. This is why you second-guess yourself constantly. This is why you have brilliant ideas that you never act on. This is why you know what you want to do but can't seem to do it. You've taught your brain that other people's opinions are more trustworthy than your own instincts. And now you're paralyzed by indecision every time you need to make a choice that matters. The approval addiction also creates what psychologists call the false self. This is the version of you that you present to the world because you think it's what people want to see. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You pretend to like things you actually hate. You hide your real opinions, your genuine interests, your authentic personality, because you're afraid the real you won't be acceptable. The tragic irony is that this strategy doesn't even work. People can sense when you're being fake, when you're performing instead of being genuine. Authenticity is magnetic precisely because it's so rare. The very thing you're hiding, your true self, is probably the thing that would attract the right people and opportunities into your life. Meanwhile, you're attracting people who like the fake version of you, which means you have to keep performing forever. You end up surrounded by relationships built on a lie, working in jobs that don't fit who you really are, living a life that looks good from the outside but feels empty from the inside. You've traded authenticity for approval, and the approval you're getting isn't even for the real you. The worst part is that the approval you're seeking is ultimately meaningless. Most of the people whose opinions you're worried about are strangers who will forget about you in 5 minutes. Even the people who know you well are usually too busy worrying about their own lives to spend much time judging yours. You're organizing your entire existence around opinions that mostly don't exist. Dr. Robin Dunbar's research shows that humans can only maintain meaningful relationships with about 150 people. That means out of the billions of people on this planet, the vast majority of them are completely irrelevant to your life. Yet you're letting the imaginary opinions of these irrelevant people control your real decisions. You're giving veto power over your dreams to people who don't even know your name. This is the approval trap. You're working so hard to be liked by everyone that you end up being loved by no one, including yourself. You're so busy being what you think others want that you lose touch with who you actually are. And the saddest part is that the people worth knowing, the people who could actually add value to your life, are looking for the authentic you that you're hiding. Chapter 3. Every single day you're not living as your authentic self. You're paying a price that most people never calculate. It's not just missed opportunities or unexpressed creativity. It's the compound cost of living someone else's life. The daily interest you pay on decisions made from fear instead of truth. These hidden costs are destroying your potential in ways that go far beyond what you can see on the surface. The first cost is opportunity cost. Every time you choose not to speak up, not to take a risk, not to pursue something you want because you're afraid of judgment, you're closing doors that could have led to extraordinary outcomes. The business you don't start, the relationship you don't pursue, the creative project you don't share, the opinion you don't express. These aren't just missed chances. They're alternative timelines where your life could have been completely different. Think about compound interest. If you invest $1 today, In 30 years, it could be worth $16. But if you wait 10 years to invest that same dollar, it might only be worth $4. Decisions work the same way. The authentic choice you don't make today doesn't just cost you today's outcome. It costs you all the future opportunities that would have grown from that choice. The second hidden cost is the energy drain of constant performance. Maintaining a false self is exhausting. You have to remember how you're supposed to act, what opinions you're supposed to have, what personality you're supposed to display. It's like running 2 operating systems on your brain at the same time. Your authentic self is trying to express itself, while your performed self is trying to maintain the illusion. This internal conflict drains your mental resources and leaves you feeling depleted. Psychologist Dr. Roy Baumeister's research on ego depletion shows that self-control is like a muscle that gets tired with use. When you're constantly monitoring and adjusting your behavior to seek approval, you're exhausting your willpower. This leaves you with less mental energy for the things that actually matter: creative thinking, problem-solving, pursuing your goals, building genuine relationships. The third cost is the corruption of your decision-making ability. When you consistently choose based on what others might think rather than what you actually want, you start to lose touch with your own preferences, values, and intuition. Your internal compass gets scrambled. You literally forget what you actually like, what you actually want, what actually matters to you. This is why so many people feel lost, confused, or empty even when their lives look successful from the outside. They've been making decisions based on external expectations for so long that they've lost connection with their internal truth. They don't know what makes them happy because they've been optimizing for what makes others happy. They don't know what they're passionate about because they've been passionate about what they thought they should be passionate about. The fourth hidden cost is the relationships you attract and the relationships you repel. When you present a false self to the world, you attract people who like that false self and repel people who would like your real self. You end up surrounded by the wrong people, people who don't actually know you, people who wouldn't like you if they saw who you really were. Meanwhile, the people who would truly appreciate your authentic self never get the chance to connect with you. This creates a vicious cycle. You feel lonely and misunderstood because you're surrounded by people who don't really know you. So, you double down on the performance, trying harder to be what you think people want, which attracts even more of the wrong people and pushes away even more of the right people. You become increasingly isolated even as you become increasingly popular. The fifth cost is the impact on your self-esteem and confidence. When you consistently choose approval over authenticity, you're sending a message to your subconscious mind that you're not acceptable as you are. You're reinforcing the belief that you need to be different, better, more acceptable to be worthy of love and respect. This erodes your confidence from the inside out. Your brain starts to believe that if you have to hide who you really are, there must be something wrong with who you really are. Even when you get approval for your performed self, it doesn't feel real because you know it's not for the real you. You develop what psychologists call imposter syndrome. The feeling that you're fooling everyone and that you're not as good as people think you are. Of course, you feel like an imposter, because you literally are. 1. The sixth and perhaps most devastating cost is the impact on your potential. When you're constantly worried about what others think, you play it safe. You aim for acceptable instead of exceptional. You choose the path of least resistance instead of the path of greatest growth. You optimize for approval instead of optimization for achievement. But greatness requires risk. Innovation requires being misunderstood. Leadership requires making unpopular decisions. If you need everyone to like you, you can never be extraordinary. You'll spend your life in the middle of the bell curve, safe and acceptable and completely unremarkable. You'll never discover what you're truly capable of, because you'll never put yourself in situations where that capability could be revealed. This is why caring what people think is not just a minor personality quirk. It's a life-limiting condition that will prevent you from ever experiencing your full potential. It's a slow poison that will kill your dreams one compromise at a time. And the worst part is that most people never even realize they're paying this price. They think they're being smart, practical, safe. They don't understand that they're actually choosing the most dangerous path of all, the path of regret. Chapter 4. Your brain is running ancient survival software in a modern world. And this mismatch is the root cause of your approval addiction. To break free, you need to understand exactly how this psychological machinery works, why it's so powerful, and how you can reprogram it to serve your actual goals instead of your prehistoric fears. The human brain evolved over millions of years in small tribal groups where social rejection was literally life-threatening. If your tribe kicked you out, you died. Not metaphorically, not eventually, but quickly and horribly. You couldn't survive alone in a world full of predators, harsh weather, and limited resources. So, evolution wired your brain with powerful mechanisms to avoid social rejection at all costs. This is why social pain activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. Your brain can't tell the difference between a social threat and a physical threat, because, for most of human history, they were the same thing. When your boss criticizes you in a meeting, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, responds as if you're being attacked by a predator. Your heart rate increases, stress hormones flood your system, and your fight or flight response kicks in. But here's the crucial point. We're no longer living in tribes of 50 people where everyone's approval matters for survival. We're living in a global society of billions, where you can thrive without the approval of any particular individual or group. Your brain hasn't caught up to this reality. It's still operating from the assumption that rejection equals death, even when rejection might actually equal freedom. The other key evolutionary factor is status anxiety. In tribal societies, your position in the social hierarchy determined your access to resources, mates, and protection. Higher status meant better chances of survival and reproduction. Lower status meant the opposite. So your brain developed sophisticated mechanisms to monitor your social standing constantly and to avoid anything that might damage your reputation. This is why you get anxious when someone might judge you negatively. Your brain interprets any potential criticism as a threat to your social status, which it unconsciously translates as a threat to your survival. The ancient part of your brain doesn't understand that in the modern world, you can be criticized by one group while being celebrated by another, that you can fail in one area while succeeding in another, that your survival doesn't depend on maintaining a perfect reputation. Neuroscientist Dr. Robert Sapolsky's research shows that humans are the only species that can activate stress responses through pure imagination. Other animals only get stressed when there's an actual present threat. But humans can lie in bed at night. Imagine what someone might think about something they might do tomorrow, and trigger the same stress response as if they were being chased by a predator. This is why the fear of judgment is so overwhelming. You're not just worried about actual criticism you're receiving right now. You're worried about potential criticism you might receive from people who might not like something you might do in the future. Your brain is running worst-case scenario simulations 24/7, keeping you in a constant state of low-level anxiety about threats that exist only in your imagination. The approval-seeking behavior also triggers the brain's reward system. When you get positive feedback, your brain releases dopamine, the same neurotransmitter involved in addiction. This creates a cycle where you need increasing amounts of approval to feel the same level of satisfaction. Like any addiction, the tolerance builds over time, and the behavior becomes compulsive rather than enjoyable. Social media has weaponized this natural reward system. The intermittent reinforcement schedule of likes, comments, and shares is the same schedule that makes gambling so addictive. You never know when you'll get positive feedback, so your brain stays in a state of constant anticipation. You become addicted not to approval itself, but to the possibility of approval. But here's what your ancient brain doesn't understand. In the modern world, being criticized often means you're doing something important. The most successful people in every field are also the most criticized. Elon Musk is simultaneously one of the most admired and most ridiculed people on the planet. If you're not getting criticized, it might mean you're not taking enough risks, not thinking big enough, not challenging enough assumptions. The evolutionary programming also creates what psychologists call the negativity bias. Your brain gives much more weight to potential negative feedback than to potential positive feedback. This made sense when avoiding one deadly mistake was more important than pursuing 10 opportunities. But in the modern world, this bias causes you to focus obsessively on the small percentage of people who might not like you, while ignoring the large percentage who might love you. Dr. Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion shows that people who treat themselves with the same kindness they would show a good friend are more resilient, more creative, and more successful than people who are self-critical. But your evolutionary programming pushes you toward harsh self-criticism as a way to avoid social mistakes. You're harder on yourself than your worst enemy would be, and you think this is protecting you when it's actually destroying you. The final piece of this psychological puzzle is the confirmation bias. Once your brain decides that other people's opinions are dangerous, it starts looking for evidence to support this belief. It notices every criticism, remembers every rejection, and interprets neutral interactions as negative ones. Meanwhile, it downplays positive feedback, forgets compliments, and explains away success. This creates a distorted reality, where criticism seems more common and more important than it actually is. Understanding this psychological machinery is crucial because it reveals that your fear of judgment isn't based on current reality. It's based on ancient programming that is not only obsolete but actively harmful in the modern context. Once you see this fear for what it really is, an outdated survival mechanism that's now sabotaging your success, you can begin the process of reprogramming your responses and taking back control of your life. Chapter 5. The moment you decide to stop caring what people think, you'll face the most sophisticated enemy you've ever encountered: your own mind. Mental resistance is your brain's security system, designed to keep you safe by keeping you the same. It will use every psychological trick in the book to pull you back into the familiar prison of approval seeking. Understanding these resistance patterns is essential because you can't fight an enemy you can't see. The first form of resistance is rationalization. Your mind is brilliant at creating logical-sounding reasons to avoid taking risks or being authentic. It will tell you that caring about others' opinions is just being considerate, that seeking approval is just being social, that avoiding criticism is just being smart. These rationalizations feel reasonable because they contain a grain of truth, but they're actually sophisticated excuses to keep you stuck. When you think about starting that business, your mind will remind you of all the businesses that fail. When you consider expressing an unpopular opinion, it will catalog all the relationships that might be damaged. When you contemplate taking a creative risk, it will list all the ways you could be embarrassed. These thoughts feel like careful analysis, but they're actually fear dressed up as wisdom. The second form of resistance is emotional overwhelm. When you start to act more authentically, your nervous system may respond with intense anxiety, panic, or dread. These feelings are so uncomfortable that most people interpret them as signs that they're doing something wrong, when they're actually signs that they're doing something different. Your brain creates emotional pain to discourage behavior that threatens your social safety, even when that behavior would improve your actual life. This is why breaking free from approval addiction feels so terrifying. You're not just changing a habit, you're rewiring neural pathways that have been reinforced for years or decades. Your brain interprets this rewiring as a threat and responds with stress hormones, anxiety, and emotional turbulence. The discomfort you feel isn't evidence that you should stop. It's evidence that you're making progress. The third form of resistance is identity protection. Your brain has built an identity around being someone who cares what people think. This identity includes stories like, "I'm a considerate person," "I'm socially aware," or "I'm responsible." When you start to challenge these patterns, your mind perceives it as an attack on who you are. It will fight to maintain consistency with your existing self-concept, even when that self-concept is limiting your potential. This identity resistance often shows up as thoughts like, "That's just not who I am," or "I could never do something like that." Your brain presents these limitations as facts about your personality, when they're actually just habits you've practiced for so long that they feel permanent. The truth is, personality is far more flexible than most people realize. You're not stuck being who you've been. You can choose who you become. The fourth form of resistance is social proof-seeking. When you start to act differently, your brain will become hypervigilant for evidence that other people are judging you negatively. It will interpret neutral facial expressions as disapproval, read criticism into innocent comments, and magnify any genuine negative feedback while minimizing positive responses. This creates a feedback loop that seems to confirm your fears, even when the evidence is distorted or imaginary. Your mind will also start comparing you to others who play it safe, using their apparent contentment as evidence that you should do the same. It will point to people who avoid risks and seem happy, conveniently ignoring all the people who took risks and thrived. This selective attention creates a biased data set that supports the status quo while hiding the potential benefits of change. The fifth form of resistance is perfectionism. Your brain will convince you that you need to have everything figured out before you can start living authentically. You'll need to be confident before you can act confident. You'll need to be fearless before you can face your fears. You'll need to be certain before you can take risks. This perfectionist thinking creates an impossible standard that guarantees you'll never start. The truth is, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action in spite of fear. Confidence isn't a prerequisite for authentic living. It's a result of authentic living. You don't become fearless by avoiding fear. You become fearless by feeling fear and acting anyway. Perfectionism is just procrastination dressed up as high standards. The sixth and most insidious form of resistance is the comfort zone expansion limit. Your brain has a built-in thermostat that regulates how much change it will allow at once. When you try to transform too quickly, it will create setbacks, sabotage, or crisis to pull you back to your familiar level of comfort. This is why people who win the lottery often end up broke again, why people who lose weight often gain it back, and why people who suddenly become successful often self-destruct. The key to overcoming this resistance is understanding that it's not personal. Your brain isn't resisting because there's something wrong with you or because you're weak. It's resisting because it's doing exactly what it was designed to do: keep you safe by keeping you the same. The resistance you feel is actually a sign that you're on the right track, that you're pushing against the boundaries of your current identity and expanding into a larger version of yourself. The most successful people in any field are not those who don't face resistance. They're those who have learned to expect it, understand it, and move forward in spite of it. They know that the voice in their head that says, "This is too risky," or "people will judge you," isn't their wise inner guide. It's their scared inner child trying to keep them small and safe. They've learned to thank that voice for trying to protect them, and then do what needs to be done anyway. Chapter 6. The transformation from approval-seeking to authentic living begins with a fundamental shift in how you view other people's opinions. Most people treat opinions like facts, like universal truths that must be respected and considered. But the reality is that opinions are just thoughts, and thoughts are just mental events that have no more inherent power than you choose to give them. Understanding this distinction is the foundation of your freedom. Every opinion someone has about you says more about them than it says about you. When someone judges your choices, your appearance, your lifestyle, or your goals, they're filtering everything through their own experiences, fears, biases, and limitations. Their criticism isn't an objective assessment of your worth. It's a reflection of their internal world projected onto your external reality. Think about this. If 10 people watch the same movie, you might get 10 completely different opinions. One person loves it, another hates it, a third thinks it's boring, a fourth finds it inspiring. The movie hasn't changed, but the viewers bring different backgrounds, preferences, and perspectives that shape their interpretation. The same principle applies to how people view you. Their opinion is shaped by their history, their insecurities, their values, their mood on that particular day. This is why seeking universal approval is not just impossible, it's meaningless. You could be the most successful, attractive, intelligent, kind person in the world, and someone would still find something to criticize. Mother Teresa, one of the most universally respected figures in modern history, had critics who questioned her methods and motivations. If even Mother Teresa couldn't avoid criticism, what makes you think you can? The people who criticize you often do so because your authenticity threatens their own self-deception. When you live freely, when you pursue your goals without apology, when you express yourself honestly, You're holding up a mirror to people who have compromised their own authenticity for the sake of acceptance. Your courage makes them uncomfortable with their own cowardice, so they try to pull you back down to their level through criticism and judgment. This is especially true when you're making positive changes in your life. The moment you start improving yourself, pursuing ambitious goals, or breaking free from limiting patterns, you'll notice that some people become critical or unsupportive. This isn't because they genuinely care about your well-being. It's because your growth reminds them of their own stagnation. Your transformation threatens the excuses they've been using to justify their own inaction. Dr. Abraham Maslow identified this phenomenon in his research on self-actualization. He found that people operating from lower levels of psychological development often feel threatened by those operating from higher levels. When you stop seeking approval and start living authentically, you're moving to a higher level of psychological functioning, and this can trigger defensive reactions from people who are still trapped in approval-seeking patterns. The most liberating realization you can have is that you are not responsible for other people's opinions, and you are not required to manage other people's emotions. If someone is upset by your choices, that's their emotional work to do, not yours. If someone is threatened by your success, that's their insecurity to deal with, not your problem to solve. You cannot live your life as a hostage to other people's psychological issues. This doesn't mean you should be deliberately hurtful or inconsiderate. There's a difference between not caring about people's opinions and not caring about people's feelings. You can treat others with kindness and respect while still refusing to let their opinions dictate your choices. You can be compassionate without being controllable. The key is developing what psychologists call an internal locus of control. This means your sense of self-worth, your decision-making, and your emotional stability come from within rather than from external validation. People with an internal locus of control ask themselves, "What do I think about this?" before asking, "What will others think about this?" They use their own values, goals, and judgment as the primary filters for making decisions. This internal orientation doesn't develop overnight. It requires consistent practice and conscious choice. Every time you catch yourself about to make a decision based on what others might think, pause and ask yourself what you actually want to do. Every time you notice yourself seeking validation, redirect that energy toward self-validation. Every time you feel the urge to explain or justify your choices to others, practice simply making the choice without explanation. One of the most powerful questions you can ask yourself is, if I knew that no one would ever find out about this decision, what would I choose? This question cuts through all the external noise and connects you directly with your authentic desires. The answer to this question is usually what you should do, regardless of who might find out or what they might think. Another transformative perspective shift is recognizing that most people are too busy worrying about their own lives to spend much time judging yours. The spotlight effect, identified by psychologist Thomas Gilovich, shows that people consistently overestimate how much others notice and remember their actions. You think everyone is watching you, but most people are wondering if anyone is watching them. Even when people do notice and judge, their attention span for your business is remarkably short. The thing you're embarrassed about, the mistake you made, the risk you took that didn't work out. These events loom large in your mind, but barely register in other people's consciousness. They have their own problems, their own goals, their own dramas to focus on. Your business is much more important to you than it is to anyone else. The final piece of this mindset shift is understanding that criticism and approval are equally meaningless when they come from the wrong sources. Praise from someone whose opinion you don't respect shouldn't make you feel good. And criticism from someone whose judgment you don't trust shouldn't make you feel bad. The source matters more than the content. Would you rather be criticized by someone you admire or praised by someone you don't respect? This is why it's crucial to identify whose opinions actually matter to you. Choose a small group of people whose judgment you genuinely value. People whose wisdom and character you respect. People who have earned the right to influence your decisions. Listen to feedback from these people, but ignore the noise from everyone else. You don't need everyone's approval. You just need the right people's respect. Starting with your own. Chapter 7. Freedom from other people's opinions requires more than just understanding why you shouldn't care. It requires a systematic approach to rewiring your mental and emotional patterns. The framework I'm about to share with you has 4 core pillars that work together to create genuine independence from external validation. These pillars are not suggestions or nice ideas. They are non-negotiable requirements for anyone serious about living authentically. The first pillar is radical self-acceptance. This is not the shallow self-love promoted by social media, where you tell yourself you're perfect just the way you are. Real self-acceptance is acknowledging all parts of yourself, including your flaws, limitations, and areas for growth, while refusing to let these imperfections diminish your inherent worth as a human being. Radical self-acceptance means looking at yourself with complete honesty and saying, "This is who I am right now. I have strengths and weaknesses, successes and failures, admirable qualities and character flaws. I am not perfect, and I don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love, respect, and happiness." This level of self-acceptance removes the desperate need for others to validate you, because you've already validated yourself. The process begins with inventory. Make a complete list of everything you don't like about yourself, everything you're ashamed of, everything you try to hide from others. Write down your failures, your mistakes, your insecurities, your limitations. This isn't about being negative, it's about being real. You cannot accept what you refuse to acknowledge. Next, for each item on your list, ask yourself, does this make me less worthy as a human being? The answer is always no. Your worth is not determined by your achievements, your appearance, your intelligence, your social status, or your track record. Your worth is inherent. You have value simply because you exist, not because of anything you've done or failed to do. This doesn't mean you shouldn't try to improve or grow. Self-acceptance and self-improvement are not contradictory. They're complementary. When you accept yourself fully, you remove the desperate, neurotic energy from self-improvement. You're no longer trying to fix yourself because you're broken. You're developing yourself because you're capable. This shift in motivation makes growth more sustainable and more enjoyable. The second pillar is values-based decision-making. Most people make decisions based on emotions, social pressure, or short-term consequences. But emotionally intelligent, authentic people make decisions based on their core values. Values are your fundamental beliefs about what's important in life. They're your internal compass, your guide for determining what's right for you regardless of what others think. The problem is, that most people have never clearly identified their values. They're operating with a vague sense of what matters to them, which makes it easy to be swayed by external influences. If you don't know what you stand for, you'll fall for anything. Clear values make decision-making simple. You choose the option that best aligns with your values, regardless of what others think about it. To identify your values, ask yourself what you would want to be remembered for at the end of your life. What qualities would you want people to associate with you? What principles would you never violate, even under pressure? What activities make you feel most alive and authentic? The answers to these questions reveal your core values. Once you've identified your values, use them as filters for every decision. Before worrying about what others think, ask yourself, which option best aligns with my values? If being honest is one of your core values, tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. If freedom is important to you, choose the path that gives you more autonomy, even if it's riskier. If creativity is a core value, prioritize creative expression even if others don't understand it. The third pillar is emotional self-regulation. Your emotions are not facts. They're temporary experiences that provide information about your internal state. When you feel anxious about someone's opinion, that anxiety is not evidence that you should be worried. It's evidence that your approval-seeking programming has been triggered. Learning to observe your emotions without being controlled by them is essential for authentic living. Emotional regulation starts with awareness. Most people are so identified with their emotions that they can't distinguish between feeling an emotion and being that emotion. They don't say, "I feel anxious." They say, "I am anxious." This identification makes them prisoners of their emotional states. True emotional maturity is the ability to feel your emotions fully while maintaining perspective and choice about how to respond. The next level of emotional regulation is understanding the difference between primary emotions and secondary emotions. Primary emotions are your immediate, natural responses to situations. Secondary emotions are your responses to your primary emotions. For example, if you feel nervous before a presentation, that nervousness is a primary emotion. If you then feel ashamed about feeling nervous, that shame is a secondary emotion. Secondary emotions are usually where the real suffering occurs. You might feel nervous before speaking publicly, but you suffer when you judge yourself for feeling nervous. You might feel disappointed when someone criticizes you, but you suffer when you criticize yourself for caring about their criticism. Learning to accept your primary emotions without adding secondary emotions dramatically reduces your emotional suffering. The fourth pillar is strategic non-conformity. This is not about being rebellious for its own sake or automatically opposing popular opinion. Strategic non-conformity means making conscious choices about when to conform and when to stand apart, based on your values and goals, rather than on fear or reactivity. Sometimes, conformity is the smart choice. If you're driving on the highway, you conform to traffic laws not because you're seeking approval, but because it serves your goal of arriving safely. If you're in a professional environment, you might conform to certain dress codes because it serves your career objectives. The key is that you're choosing conformity strategically, not compulsively. But when conformity conflicts with your values, goals, or authentic self-expression, strategic non-conformity becomes essential. This means being willing to stand out, to be misunderstood, to face criticism when it serves your larger purpose. It means choosing significance over safety, impact over acceptance. Strategic nonconformity also means developing what psychologist Dr. Solomon Asch called independence of judgment. In his famous conformity experiments, Asch found that people would give obviously wrong answers to simple questions just to conform with a group. But some individuals maintained their independent judgment despite group pressure. These individuals had developed the mental strength to trust their own perceptions, even when everyone else disagreed. This independence of judgment is crucial in our age of social media echo chambers and viral outrage. You need to be able to form your own opinions based on evidence and reasoning, not on what's popular or socially acceptable. You need to be comfortable holding unpopular views when the evidence supports them, and you need to be willing to change your mind when new evidence emerges, regardless of what you've previously said publicly. These four pillars work together synergistically. Self-acceptance gives you the foundation to act on your values. Values-based decision-making provides direction for your choices. Emotional regulation keeps you stable when facing criticism or pressure. Strategic nonconformity ensures you don't sacrifice your authenticity for social acceptance. Together, they create an unshakable foundation for living freely and authentically, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Chapter 8. Building immunity to other people's opinions is like building immunity to a disease. You don't achieve it by avoiding exposure. You achieve it by gradually increasing your tolerance through controlled exposure while strengthening your internal defenses. The techniques I'm about to share will help you develop practical, everyday immunity to judgment, criticism, and social pressure. The first technique is opinion inoculation. Just as vaccines introduce small amounts of a virus to help your immune system build defenses, opinion inoculation involves deliberately exposing yourself to small doses of judgment or criticism in low-stakes situations. This builds your tolerance gradually so that when larger criticisms come, they have less power to destabilize you. Start with tiny acts of nonconformity. Wear something slightly unusual. Express a mildly unpopular opinion in a casual conversation. Order something different at a restaurant where you're a regular. Take a different route to work. These small acts of authenticity help you practice being yourself, even when others might notice or have opinions about it. The key is to start small and gradually increase the stakes. If you jump immediately into major acts of nonconformity, your nervous system may become overwhelmed and reinforce the fear response. But if you build gradually, you train your brain to associate authenticity with safety rather than danger. As you practice these small acts, pay attention to what actually happens versus what you feared would happen. Most of the time, you'll discover that your fears were greatly exaggerated. People either don't notice, don't care, or actually respect your individuality. This real-world feedback helps reprogram your brain's threat detection system. The second technique is the criticism audit. Most people avoid criticism at all costs. But this avoidance actually makes criticism more powerful when it does come. Instead, seek out constructive feedback and learn to separate useful information from emotional noise. This practice transforms criticism from something that happens to you into something you actively use for growth. Start by asking trusted friends, family members, or colleagues for honest feedback about areas where you could improve. Make it clear that you want genuine input, not just reassurance. When you receive criticism, resist the urge to defend, explain, or justify. Instead, listen fully and ask clarifying questions to understand their perspective. After receiving criticism, evaluate it objectively. Ask yourself, is there any truth in this feedback that could help me grow? Sometimes the answer is yes, and you can use the information to improve. Sometimes the answer is no, and you can discard the feedback without taking it personally. Either way, you've practiced receiving criticism without being emotionally devastated by it. The most powerful part of this practice is learning to separate the message from the messenger. Valuable feedback can come from people you don't particularly like, while people you care about might give you advice that isn't helpful. Focus on the content, not the source, and you'll find wisdom in unexpected places while avoiding manipulation from familiar ones. The third technique is deliberate visibility. One of the main reasons people fear judgment is because they've spent years hiding their true selves, their real opinions, their authentic desires. The solution is gradual, intentional revelation of who you really are. This doesn't mean oversharing or being inappropriate. It means stopping the exhausting performance of being someone you're not. Start sharing your real opinions in conversations, instead of saying what you think people want to hear. If you disagree with something, express your disagreement respectfully, but clearly. If you have an unusual interest or hobby, mention it instead of keeping it secret. If you have strong values or beliefs, let them inform your choices visibly. The goal is not to shock people or be controversial for its own sake. The goal is to let people see the real you, so that the relationships and opportunities in your life are based on authenticity rather than performance. This way, the approval you receive is for who you actually are, not for who you're pretending to be. Deliberate visibility also means sharing your struggles, failures, and imperfections when appropriate. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's courage. When you're open about your challenges, you give others permission to be human too. This creates deeper connections and reduces the pressure to maintain a perfect image. The fourth technique is reframe and redirect. When you notice yourself starting to worry about what someone thinks, immediately redirect that mental energy towards something you can actually control. Instead of, "What if they judge me?" ask, "What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail?" Instead of, "What will people think?" ask, "What does my higher self want to do in this situation?" This redirection works because your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. When you consciously shift your attention from external opinions to internal guidance, you break the anxiety loop before it gains momentum. The more you practice this redirection, the more automatic it becomes. You can also reframe criticism as useful data rather than personal attack. When someone judges your choices, they're giving you information about their values, preferences, and psychological state. This information might be useful in understanding how to interact with them, but it doesn't need to change your fundamental course of action. The fifth technique is the confidence bank account. Every time you act authentically despite fear, every time you express your real opinion despite potential disagreement, every time you pursue your goals despite criticism, you make a deposit in your confidence bank account. These accumulated experiences of surviving and thriving through authenticity create unshakable self-assurance. Keep a record of your authentic actions and their outcomes. Write down times when you were yourself and it worked out well. Document moments when you faced criticism and survived. Note occasions when being genuine led to better relationships or opportunities. This evidence contradicts your brain's tendency to focus on potential negative outcomes. The confidence bank account also grows through competence. The better you become at things you care about, the less you need external validation to feel good about yourself. When you know you're skilled, knowledgeable, or capable in areas that matter to you, other people's uninformed opinions carry less weight. The sixth technique is social circle optimization. You cannot build immunity to criticism while surrounded by people who constantly judge and criticize. Evaluate your relationships honestly and minimize time with people who make you feel like you need to perform or hide parts of yourself. Increase time with people who appreciate your authenticity and encourage your growth. This doesn't mean cutting off everyone who ever disagrees with you. Healthy relationships include honest feedback and different perspectives. But there's a difference between people who challenge you to grow and people who tear you down to feel better about themselves. Learn to recognize this difference and adjust your social investments accordingly. Surround yourself with people who are also committed to authenticity and growth. When you're around others who are living courageously, their example reinforces your own commitment to authentic living. Their support makes it easier to maintain your immunity when facing criticism from less evolved sources. These techniques work together to create comprehensive immunity to other people's opinions. The key is consistent practice over time. You're not just learning new skills. You're rewiring neural pathways that have been reinforced for years. Be patient with the process, but be relentless in your practice. Your freedom depends on it. Chapter 9. When you start living authentically, criticism will come. This isn't a possibility. It's a guarantee. The question is not whether you'll face negative feedback, but whether you'll be mentally and emotionally prepared to handle it without reverting to approval-seeking behavior. Mastering the art of receiving criticism is perhaps the most crucial skill for maintaining your independence from others' opinions. The first principle of handling criticism is emotional preparation. Most people get blindsided by criticism because they secretly hope that if they're careful enough, diplomatic enough, or perfect enough, they can avoid all negative feedback. This hope sets them up for devastation when criticism inevitably comes. Instead, expect criticism as a normal part of an authentic life. This doesn't mean being paranoid or pessimistic. It means being realistic. If you're doing anything meaningful, anything creative, anything that challenges the status quo, some people will disagree with you. If you're living authentically, some people will be uncomfortable with your choices. If you're growing and changing, some people will resist your transformation. Criticism is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's often a sign that you're doing something right. When you expect criticism, it loses its power to shock and destabilize you. Instead of thinking, "I can't believe they said that about me," you think, "There's the criticism I was expecting. How do I want to respond to this?" This shift from reactive victim to proactive responder changes everything about how criticism affects you. The second principle is source evaluation. Not all criticism is created equal, and not all critics deserve the same level of attention. Before you even consider the content of criticism, evaluate the source. Ask yourself, who is this person? What are their qualifications to judge this area of my life? What might motivate them to criticize me. Critics generally fall into several categories. There are constructive critics who genuinely want to help you improve. Their feedback, even when it stings, comes from a place of care and wisdom. These people have earned the right to influence your decisions through their character, experience, or relationship with you. Then there are competitive critics who tear you down to make themselves feel better. These people criticize not because they want to help you, but because your success or authenticity threatens their own self-image. Their criticism says more about their insecurities than about your performance. There are also ignorant critics who judge you based on incomplete information, misunderstanding, or lack of expertise. They might have strong opinions about your choices, but they lack the knowledge or context to make informed judgments. Their criticism can be safely ignored. Finally, there are malicious critics who attack you deliberately to cause harm. These people are not interested in truth or improvement. They're interested in destruction. Engaging with malicious criticism is like wrestling with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it. Once you've evaluated the source, you can determine how much weight, if any, to give their opinion. Constructive criticism from qualified sources deserves serious consideration. Everything else can be acknowledged and discarded without emotional investment. The third principle is content analysis. When criticism comes from a source you respect, separate the emotional delivery from the factual content. People often package valuable feedback in harsh or insensitive language, especially when they're frustrated or passionate about the issue. Your job is to extract the useful information while ignoring the emotional noise. Ask yourself, if I remove all the judgmental language and personal attacks, what specific, actionable feedback is this person trying to give me? Sometimes you'll find genuine insights wrapped in cruel packaging. Sometimes you'll discover that once you remove the emotional content, there's nothing of substance left. Also ask, is this criticism about my actions or about me as a person? Feedback about specific behaviors or decisions can be useful. Attacks on your character, worth, or identity should be dismissed immediately. You are not your actions. You can change your behavior without changing your fundamental worth as a human being. The fourth principle is the 24-hour rule. When you receive harsh or unexpected criticism, your initial emotional reaction is rarely your wisest response. Your brain goes into fight or flight mode, flooding your system with stress hormones that impair rational thinking. Give yourself at least 24 hours before responding to any criticism that triggers a strong emotional reaction. During this cooling-off period, process your emotions without acting on them. Feel the hurt, anger, or disappointment fully, but don't make decisions from these emotional states. Journal about your reaction, talk to trusted friends, or use physical exercise to metabolize the emotional intensity. After 24 hours, you can evaluate the criticism more objectively. Often, what felt devastating in the moment seems much more manageable with some emotional distance. You can separate valid concerns from personal attacks and respond from a place of strength rather than reactivity. The fifth principle is strategic response. Once you've evaluated the source, analyzed the content, and processed your emotions, you can choose how to respond. You have 4 basic options: learn and adjust, clarify, and educate, defend and explain, or ignore and continue. If the criticism contains valid points that could help you improve, learn, and adjust, thank the critic for their feedback and implement changes that align with your values and goals. This doesn't mean accepting every piece of criticism, but it does mean being humble enough to grow when growth is warranted. If the criticism is based on misunderstanding or misinformation, you might choose to clarify and educate, provide additional context, correct factual errors, or explain your reasoning. But be careful not to fall into the trap of over-explaining or trying to convince people who have already made up their minds. If the criticism is unfair but comes from someone whose relationship you value, you might choose to defend and explain your position. Set boundaries around what kind of feedback you'll accept and how you expect to be treated, even in disagreement. If the criticism is from an unreliable source or contains no useful information, ignore and continue. Don't waste energy responding to every critic or trying to change every mind. Your time and attention are precious resources that should be invested in productive activities, not defensive reactions. The sixth principle is emotional immunity building. Every time you handle criticism well, you become more resistant to future criticism. Each experience of surviving negative feedback intact proves to your subconscious mind that criticism is not actually dangerous. This builds genuine confidence rather than false bravado. Keep a record of criticisms you've received and how they turned out. Most of the negative predictions people make about your choices never materialize. Most of the dire consequences they warn about never happen. This track record of surviving and thriving despite criticism becomes powerful evidence that you can trust your own judgment. Remember that the people who criticize you today might praise you tomorrow, when your results become undeniable. Many of the greatest achievements in history were initially criticized by the very people who later celebrated them. Vincent van Gogh sold only one painting during his lifetime, but is now considered one of the greatest artists ever. The Wright brothers were ridiculed for their flying machine experiments, but changed the world. The final principle is maintaining your mission focus. The ultimate immunity to criticism is being so focused on your goals and values that other people's opinions become irrelevant distractions. When you're clear about your purpose and committed to your path, criticism becomes just noise that you can acknowledge and then ignore. Ask yourself, will this criticism help me accomplish my mission? If yes, learn from it. If no, dismiss it. Don't let critics derail you from your authentic path just because they're loud, persistent, or numerous. History is written by people who stayed focused on their vision despite opposition, not by people who abandoned their dreams to avoid criticism. Chapter 10. The ultimate goal of stopping caring what people think is not to become callous or disconnected from others, but to develop authentic confidence that comes from internal validation rather than external approval. This kind of confidence is unshakable because it doesn't depend on circumstances, other people's opinions, or external achievements. It's rooted in a deep knowing of your own worth that can't be granted or taken away by anyone else. Authentic confidence begins with radical self-honesty. Most people try to build confidence by lying to themselves about their abilities, accomplishments, or potential. They practice positive affirmations that feel false, visualize success they haven't earned, or pretend they're more capable than they actually are. This approach creates what psychologists call false confidence or defensive self-esteem, which is actually fragile and easily threatened. True confidence comes from accepting the complete truth about yourself, your strengths and weaknesses, your successes and failures, your potential and your limitations. When you stop trying to convince yourself that you're perfect, you paradoxically become more confident because you're no longer afraid of being exposed as imperfect. You've already acknowledged your imperfections, so they can't be used against you. This self-honesty includes accepting that you're a work in progress. Confident people don't pretend they've arrived. They embrace the fact that they're constantly growing, learning, and evolving. They're comfortable with not knowing everything, not being the best at everything, not having it all figured out. This comfort with imperfection is actually what makes them more capable of growth and achievement. The second foundation of authentic confidence is competence building. While confidence doesn't require perfection, it does require some level of actual ability in areas that matter to you. If you want to feel confident about your career, you need to develop real skills and knowledge in your field. If you want to feel confident socially, you need to practice social skills and learn how to connect with people authentically. The key is focusing on areas of competence that align with your values and goals, rather than trying to be good at everything or comparing yourself to others. You don't need to be the best in the world. You just need to be good enough to accomplish what you want to accomplish. This focused competence building creates genuine confidence because it's based on real ability rather than wishful thinking. Competence building also means embracing the learning process rather than just focusing on outcomes. When you're confident in your ability to learn, adapt, and improve, temporary failures become learning opportunities rather than threats to your self-esteem. This growth mindset, identified by psychologist Dr. Carol Dweck, is one of the most powerful foundations of lasting confidence. The third foundation is value alignment. Authentic confidence comes from living in harmony with your deepest values and beliefs. When your actions match your values, you feel integrated and whole. When there's a disconnect between what you believe and how you behave, you feel conflicted and insecure, regardless of how successful you might appear externally. This alignment requires first identifying your core values, then making decisions that honor those values, even when it's difficult or unpopular. Every time you act in alignment with your values, you make a deposit in your confidence account. Every time you compromise your values for external rewards, you withdraw from that account. Value alignment also means having the courage to stand for something, even when standing alone. Confidence doesn't come from being liked by everyone. It comes from knowing that you can be trusted to do the right thing according to your own moral compass. This integrity creates unshakable confidence because it's not dependent on other people's approval or changing circumstances. The fourth foundation is emotional regulation mastery. Confident people are not those who never feel negative emotions. They're those who can feel difficult emotions without being controlled by them. They understand that emotions are temporary experiences that provide information, not permanent states that define their identity. This emotional mastery includes the ability to self-soothe when facing criticism, rejection, or failure. Instead of seeking external comfort or validation, confident people have developed internal resources for managing emotional turbulence. They can sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it or fix it. Emotional regulation also means taking responsibility for your emotional state rather than blaming others for how you feel. When you realize that you have the power to choose your response to any situation, you become infinitely more confident because you're no longer at the mercy of external circumstances or other people's behavior. The fifth foundation is purpose connection. Authentic confidence is easier to maintain when you're connected to something larger than yourself, whether that's a mission, a cause, a creative vision, or a service to others. When you're focused on contributing value to the world, you're less likely to be derailed by criticism or self-doubt, because your attention is directed outward rather than inward. This purpose doesn't have to be grandiose or world-changing. It could be raising your children well, mastering a craft, building a business, or simply being a positive influence in your community. The key is that your purpose is authentic to you, not something you think you should care about because it sounds impressive or noble. Purpose-driven confidence is particularly powerful because it gives you a reason to persist through difficulties. When you're clear about why your goals matter, temporary setbacks become manageable obstacles rather than devastating defeats. Your purpose provides the motivation to continue growing and contributing even when external validation is absent. The sixth foundation is relationship sovereignty. Confident people understand that they are complete and whole on their own, even though they choose to form connections with others. They enter relationships from a place of choice rather than need, giving rather than taking, strength rather than weakness. This sovereignty means being comfortable being alone and not defining your worth through your relationships. When you're not desperate for connection, you're more selective about the relationships you form and more likely to attract healthy, supportive people. You're also less likely to compromise your authenticity to maintain relationships that don't serve your highest good. Relationship sovereignty also includes the ability to set boundaries, communicate directly, and end relationships that are toxic or draining. When you know that you can survive and thrive on your own, you're not afraid to risk relationships by being honest, setting standards, or standing up for yourself. The final foundation is legacy thinking. Confident people make decisions based on how they want to be remembered rather than how they want to be perceived in the moment. They ask themselves what kind of person they want to be and what kind of impact they want to have, then align their actions with these long-term visions. This perspective naturally reduces concern about immediate criticism or approval because it places your actions in a larger context. When you're focused on building something meaningful over time, temporary opinions become less important than consistent progress toward your vision. Legacy thinking also includes the understanding that your example influences others, especially those who are still trapped in approval-seeking patterns. When you live authentically and confidently, you give others permission to do the same. Your courage becomes contagious, creating ripple effects that extend far beyond your immediate circumstances. These foundations work together to create confidence that can't be shaken by external circumstances. When you know yourself honestly, develop real competence, live your values, manage your emotions, pursue your purpose, maintain relationship sovereignty, and think in terms of legacy, you become naturally confident not because you need to prove anything to anyone, but because you've become someone worth being confident about. Chapter 11. Knowing how to stop caring what people think is worthless. Unless you can apply it in real-world situations where emotions run high, stakes feel significant, and your old patterns try to reassert control. The transformation from approval-seeking to authentic living happens not in moments of calm reflection, but in moments of pressure, when everything inside you wants to revert to seeking safety through conformity. The workplace is often the most challenging environment for maintaining authenticity because your livelihood appears to depend on other people's opinions. But this perception is usually more limiting than the reality. Most successful professionals are those who bring their authentic selves to work while maintaining appropriate boundaries and professionalism. When facing a situation where you want to express a different opinion in a meeting, your brain will immediately start calculating risks. What if your boss disagrees? What if your colleagues think you're being difficult? What if your idea is shot down publicly? These fears feel overwhelming because your primitive brain interprets workplace rejection as a threat to survival. The key is distinguishing between reasonable professional considerations and neurotic approval seeking. It's reasonable to consider the timing, phrasing, and context of your communication. It's neurotic to stay silent about important issues because you're afraid someone might disagree with you. The question isn't whether there's any risk in speaking up. It's whether the risk of speaking up is greater than the risk of staying silent. Before any important workplace interaction, ask yourself, what would I say if I cared more about the outcome than about being liked? Often, you'll discover that authentic communication actually serves the organization's goals better than diplomatic people-pleasing. Most leaders respect employees who can think independently and communicate honestly, even when they disagree. When you do speak up authentically and face pushback, resist the urge to immediately backtrack or apologize for having an opinion. Stand behind your words while remaining open to discussion. Say something like, "I understand you see it differently. Help me understand your perspective," instead of, "Sorry, I was just thinking out loud," or "Maybe I'm wrong." Social situations present a different set of challenges because the stakes seem lower, but the peer pressure can be more intense. Whether it's choosing not to drink at a party, expressing political views that differ from your friend group, or simply declining an invitation because you need alone time, social authenticity requires the courage to potentially disappoint people you care about. The most difficult social situations are often with family members who have known you in your people-pleasing mode and resist your transformation. When you start setting boundaries, expressing opinions, or making choices that differ from family expectations, you may face guilt trips, emotional manipulation, or accusations that you've changed in a negative way. Your family's resistance to your authenticity is not evidence that you should revert to people-pleasing. It's evidence that your old patterns served their comfort zone, and your growth threatens their ability to predict and control your behavior. Healthy family members will adjust to your authenticity over time. Unhealthy ones will escalate their attempts to pull you back into dysfunction. The key with family situations is maintaining love and respect while refusing to sacrifice your growth for their comfort. You can say, "I love you and I'm not going to argue about this," or "I understand, this is different from what you expected, and this is what works for me now." You don't need their approval of your choices to maintain a loving relationship. Romantic relationships present perhaps the deepest challenge to authenticity because the fear of abandonment can be so intense. Many people become chameleons in romantic relationships, shape-shifting to match what they think their partner wants, rather than revealing who they actually are. This strategy might work short-term, but it creates relationships built on false foundations that inevitably collapse or become sources of resentment. Authentic romantic relationships require the courage to be disliked by someone you care about. This doesn't mean being deliberately difficult or confrontational. It means being honest about your needs, expressing your opinions, maintaining your interests, and setting boundaries even when these choices create tension or conflict. The paradox of romantic authenticity is that being willing to lose someone is often what makes them want to stay. Desperation is repulsive. Confidence is attractive. When you're authentic in relationships, you might lose partners who weren't truly compatible with you, but you'll attract partners who appreciate the real you. Financial situations often trigger the strongest approval-seeking behaviors because money feels directly connected to survival. Whether you're negotiating a salary, asking for a raise, setting prices for your services, or making investment decisions, the fear of financial rejection can override your authentic judgment. But people-pleasing in financial matters often costs you money. When you're afraid to negotiate because you want to be liked, you accept less than you're worth. When you're afraid to set boundaries with clients because you need their approval, you get taken advantage of. When you make financial decisions based on what others might think rather than what serves your goals, you compromise your financial future. The most powerful financial authenticity comes from knowing your value and communicating it clearly without apology. This doesn't mean being arrogant or inflexible. It means doing your research, understanding market rates, and presenting your case based on value delivered rather than need for approval. Online interactions present unique challenges because the potential audience is vast and the feedback is immediate and often harsh. Social media can trigger approval-seeking behaviors on steroids because every post is potentially viewed and judged by hundreds or thousands of people. The temptation to craft a perfect online persona can be overwhelming. The key to online authenticity is remembering that social media is not real life. The opinions of strangers on the internet carry zero weight in your actual existence unless you give them that power. Most online criticism comes from people who are miserable in their own lives and take out their frustration on others from behind the safety of a screen. Develop a clear strategy for online engagement that aligns with your values and goals. If you're building a business or personal brand, post content that represents your authentic views and expertise. Not what you think will get the most likes. If you're using social media for personal connection, share real moments and thoughts rather than performing perfection. When facing online criticism, remember that engaging with trolls and critics almost never leads to productive outcomes. Your energy is better spent creating value for people who appreciate your authentic expression than trying to convince people who have already decided to dislike you. The daily practice of authenticity requires vigilance because approval-seeking behaviors are often unconscious habits. Throughout each day, you'll face dozens of small moments where you can choose authenticity or people-pleasing. These moments seem insignificant individually, but they add up to determine the overall direction of your life. Start each day by setting an intention to prioritize authenticity over approval. Before important interactions, take a moment to connect with your values and goals, rather than immediately calculating how to be liked. After challenging situations, reflect on how you handled them and what you might do differently next time. Keep a daily log of moments when you chose authenticity over approval and moments when you reverted to people-pleasing. This tracking helps you become more conscious of your patterns and celebrate your progress. Over time, you'll notice that authentic choices become more natural and automatic. The transformation happens through consistency, not perfection. You don't need to become immediately and completely immune to other people's opinions. You just need to choose authenticity slightly more often than people-pleasing, building momentum gradually until authentic living becomes your default mode. Chapter 12. Living authentically will fundamentally transform your relationships. And not all of these changes will be comfortable. Some relationships will deepen and improve as people connect with the real you. Others will become strained or end entirely as the people who were attracted to your performed self lose interest in your authentic self. This relationship evolution is not a bug in the system. It's a feature that ensures you're surrounded by people who actually know and appreciate who you are. The first category of relationship change involves people who were unconsciously invested in your people-pleasing behavior. These might be friends who enjoyed having someone who never challenged them, family members who liked being able to control your choices, or romantic partners who preferred a compliant companion to an authentic equal. When you stop being available for these dynamics, these relationships will face a crisis. Some of these people will adapt and grow. They'll learn to appreciate your honesty, respect your boundaries, and engage with you as an equal rather than as someone they can manipulate or control. These relationships will become stronger and more genuine as you both learn to interact from authenticity rather than dysfunction. Others will not adapt. They'll escalate their attempts to pull you back into the old dynamic through guilt trips, emotional manipulation, threats, or simply withdrawing their attention and affection. These people were never really in relationship with you. They were in relationship with your usefulness to them. Losing these relationships is not a loss. It's a liberation. The key is not taking their resistance personally. When someone reacts negatively to your authenticity, they're revealing something about their own psychological state, not about your worth. People who are secure and healthy want the people they care about to be authentic and empowered. People who are insecure and unhealthy need others to be diminished so they can feel better about themselves. The second category involves people who never knew the real you because you've been performing for so long. These might be colleagues who only know your professional persona, friends who only see your social mask, or family members who stopped seeing your authentic self years ago. When you start revealing your real thoughts, feelings, and desires, they might be surprised or confused. Some of these people will be delighted to discover who you really are. They might say things like, "I've always sensed there was more to you," or "I'm so glad you feel comfortable enough to share this with me." These reactions reveal that authentic connection was always possible. You just weren't allowing it. Others might struggle with the change. They've become comfortable with the version of you they know, and any deviation feels threatening or disorienting. They might pressure you to go back to being yourself, not understanding that you're actually being yourself for the first time in years. The third category includes the new people you'll attract once you start living authentically. When you stop hiding your real interests, opinions, and personality, you become visible to people who share your values and appreciate your uniqueness. These relationships tend to develop more quickly and deeply because they're based on truth rather than performance. You might find yourself connecting with people you previously thought were out of your league or incompatible with you. When you were people-pleasing, you attracted other people-pleasers and those who wanted to control people-pleasers. When you're authentic, you attract other authentic people and those who value authenticity. These new relationships require different skills than people-pleasing relationships. Instead of focusing on being likable, you'll need to focus on being genuine. Instead of avoiding conflict, you'll need to learn how to disagree respectfully. Instead of sacrificing your needs, you'll need to learn how to communicate your needs clearly. One of the most profound shifts happens in romantic relationships. When you stop being desperate for approval, you become much more attractive as a romantic partner. Desperation is repulsive across all genders and orientations. Confidence and self-possession are universally attractive. When you know your worth and live your values, you naturally attract partners who are drawn to these qualities. But authentic dating can feel more challenging initially, because you're no longer willing to be whoever someone wants you to be. You'll have fewer matches and connections, but the connections you do have will be much higher quality. You'll attract people who like you for who you actually are, rather than for who you're pretending to be. Professional relationships also shift dramatically when you start bringing authenticity to work. You might find that some colleagues and superiors respect you more when you express your genuine thoughts and ideas, rather than just agreeing with whatever they say. Leaders are often looking for people who can think independently and contribute original perspectives. However, some workplace relationships might become more challenging. Colleagues who were used to you being agreeable might be confused or threatened by your newfound willingness to disagree or set boundaries. Superiors who enjoyed having a compliant subordinate might resist your transformation into someone with opinions and standards. The key to navigating workplace authenticity is maintaining professionalism while refusing to sacrifice your core values. You can disagree respectfully, set boundaries diplomatically, and express your ideas constructively. Authenticity doesn't mean being combative or inappropriate. It means being honest and true to your principles. Family relationships often undergo the most dramatic changes because family members have the longest history with your people-pleasing patterns and may feel most entitled to maintaining them. Parents might struggle with your newfound independence. Siblings might resent your refusal to play familiar roles. Extended family might be confused by your different choices and opinions. These changes can be particularly challenging during family gatherings, holidays, and major life events where old dynamics are most likely to resurface. You might face pressure to keep the peace by reverting to your old patterns. The phrase, "That's just how our family is," becomes a weapon used against your growth. Standing firm during these family challenges is crucial because family members often serve as the canaries in the coal mine for your authenticity. If you can maintain your authentic self with family members who have the most investment in keeping you small, you can maintain it anywhere. The most important relationship change is with yourself. As you stop seeking external validation, you'll need to develop internal validation skills. This means learning to appreciate your own accomplishments, comfort your own emotional pain, and celebrate your own growth without needing others to witness or approve. This self-relationship development can feel lonely initially because you're no longer depending on others for emotional regulation. But it's actually the foundation of true independence and mature love. When you can meet your own emotional needs, your relationships become choices rather than desperate attempts to get needs met. You'll also discover aspects of yourself that you've hidden or suppressed for years, interests you abandoned because others didn't share them, opinions you silenced because they weren't popular. dreams you gave up because others thought they were unrealistic. As you reclaim these parts of yourself, you become more whole and integrated. The relationship evolution process requires patience because not everyone will adapt to the changes at the same pace. Some people need time to adjust to your authenticity. Others will never adjust and will eventually exit your life. Both outcomes are positive because they move you toward relationships based on truth rather than performance. Remember that the goal isn't to have the most relationships. It's to have the right relationships. Quality over quantity becomes the standard. You'd rather have 5 genuine connections than 50 superficial ones. You'd rather be alone than be in relationships where you have to hide who you are. Chapter 13. The transformation from approval-seeking to authentic living is not a destination you arrive at once and maintain effortlessly. It's an ongoing process that requires daily commitment, continuous vigilance, and regular reinforcement. Your old patterns of people-pleasing were developed over years or decades, and they won't disappear overnight just because you've decided to change. Understanding the nature of sustainable transformation is crucial for long-term success. The first principle of sustainable change is expecting and preparing for setbacks. There will be days when you revert to approval-seeking behaviors. You'll catch yourself saying yes when you meant no, hiding your opinions to avoid conflict, or seeking validation from people whose opinions shouldn't matter to you. These setbacks are not failures. They're normal parts of the rewiring process. When setbacks occur, resist the urge to judge yourself harshly or abandon your commitment to authenticity. Instead, treat each setback as valuable data about your triggers, weak points, and areas that need more attention. Ask yourself what circumstances led to the setback, what emotions you were feeling, and what you can do differently next time. The key is getting back on track quickly rather than using one setback as an excuse to abandon your progress entirely. Many people fall into the all-or-nothing trap, where one moment of people-pleasing becomes justification for returning to old patterns completely. This binary thinking undermines sustainable change. Progress is not about perfection. It's about recovery speed. The second principle is building systematic accountability. Sustainable transformation requires external support systems and internal monitoring mechanisms that help you stay committed to authenticity even when it's challenging. This accountability can take many forms, but it must be consistent and honest. Consider working with a therapist, coach, or mentor who understands the importance of authentic living and can help you navigate challenging situations. Join groups or communities of people who are also committed to personal growth and authenticity. These connections provide both support during difficult moments and inspiration from others who are successfully living authentically. Internal accountability involves regular self-assessment and reflection. Set aside time weekly to evaluate your authenticity levels across different areas of your life. Where are you consistently authentic? Where do you still struggle with people-pleasing? What patterns are emerging? This honest self-evaluation helps you adjust your approach and focus your efforts where they're most needed. The third principle is continuous skill development. Authentic living requires skills that most people never learn because they're taught to prioritize likability over honesty. These skills include boundary setting, conflict resolution, emotional regulation, direct communication, and self-advocacy. Like any skills, They improve with practice and deteriorate without use. Make authenticity skill development a regular part of your personal growth routine. Read books about emotional intelligence, communication, and personal development. Practice difficult conversations in low-stakes situations before applying these skills in high-stakes environments. Seek feedback from trusted sources about how you handle challenging interpersonal situations. Also, develop what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to experience uncomfortable emotions without immediately trying to escape them. Authentic living often involves temporary discomfort as you navigate conflicts, set boundaries, or face criticism. The stronger your distress tolerance, the more sustainable your authenticity becomes. The fourth principle is environmental optimization. Your social and physical environment significantly influences your ability to maintain authentic patterns. If you're constantly surrounded by people who expect you to please, maintaining authenticity becomes an uphill battle. If your environment supports and rewards authentic behavior, maintaining it becomes natural. Gradually shift your environment to support your commitment to authenticity. This might mean spending less time with people who drain your energy and more time with people who energize you. It might mean changing your social activities, professional associations, or even geographic location if your current environment is fundamentally incompatible with authentic living. Environmental optimization also includes creating physical reminders of your commitment to authenticity. This could be quotes, images, or objects that remind you of your values and goals. Many people find it helpful to have a morning routine that connects them with their authentic self before facing the day's challenges. The fifth principle is identity reinforcement. Sustainable change requires shifting your identity from someone who seeks approval to someone who lives authentically. This identity shift happens through consistent actions that prove to yourself that you are calm, indeed an authentic person. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you reinforce this new identity. Create and regularly review a clear vision of who you want to be as an authentic person. What values do you stand for? How do you handle conflicts? What kind of relationships do you maintain? How do you make decisions? This vision serves as a North Star that guides your choices and helps you stay consistent with your authentic identity. Also develop personal rituals and practices that reinforce your commitment to authenticity. This might be journaling, meditation, visualization, or physical practices that connect you with your values and strengthen your resolve. These practices serve as daily reminders of who you're choosing to become. The sixth principle is flexibility within consistency. While your commitment to authenticity should be unwavering, your methods and strategies may need to evolve as you grow and as your circumstances change. What works for maintaining authenticity in your 20s might not work in your 40s. What works in one career might not work in another. Stay open to adjusting your approach while maintaining your core commitment. This might mean learning new communication skills as you advance in your career, developing different boundary-setting strategies as your family dynamics change, or finding new ways to express authenticity as you discover more about yourself. The seventh principle is patience with the process. Authentic transformation is measured in years, not weeks or months. The people around you need time to adjust to the new you. Your own neural pathways need time to rewire. Your confidence needs time to stabilize. Rushing the process often leads to burnout or regression. Set realistic timelines for change and celebrate small victories along the way. Notice and appreciate incremental improvements rather than focusing only on dramatic transformations. Remember that every moment you choose authenticity over approval is a victory worth acknowledging. The eighth and final principle is paying it forward. One of the most powerful ways to maintain your own authenticity is to help others develop theirs. Whether through formal mentoring, informal support, or simply being an example of authentic living, helping others reinforces your own commitment while creating a more authentic world. Share your struggles and successes with people who are earlier in their authenticity journey. Offer encouragement to friends who are taking risks or setting boundaries. Model authentic behavior in your family, workplace, and community. Your example gives others permission to live more authentically, which creates environments that support your continued growth. When you become someone who helps others live authentically, your own authenticity becomes not just a personal choice, but a service to the world. This sense of purpose and contribution can provide the motivation needed to persist through challenging periods and maintain your commitment long-term. Chapter 14. When you truly stop caring what people think, the transformation extends far beyond your immediate relationships and daily interactions. This shift creates ripple effects that touch every area of your life, often in ways you never expected. These benefits compound over time, creating positive feedback loops that make authenticity increasingly rewarding and self-reinforcing. The first major benefit is the dramatic increase in your decision-making speed and quality. When you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of judgment, you can make choices quickly based on your values, goals, and intuition, rather than getting stuck in endless analysis of how others might react. This decisiveness becomes a massive competitive advantage in both personal and professional contexts. Think about how much mental energy you currently waste running scenarios about what people might think about your choices. This cognitive load disappears when you stop caring about external opinions, freeing up enormous mental resources for creative thinking, problem-solving, and productive action. Your mind becomes clearer and more focused because it's no longer cluttered with approval-seeking calculations. This mental clarity leads to significantly better decisions because you're no longer filtering every choice through the distorted lens of people-pleasing. You can evaluate options based on their actual merits rather than their perceived acceptability. You can take calculated risks that others avoid because they're too concerned about potential criticism. The second major benefit is the acceleration of your personal and professional growth. When you're willing to be disliked, you can take on challenges that approval seekers avoid. You can speak up in meetings with innovative ideas. You can start businesses in crowded markets. You can pursue creative projects that push boundaries. You can enter relationships that stretch you beyond your comfort zone. This willingness to face criticism becomes rocket fuel for achievement, because most breakthrough opportunities require some level of controversy or risk. The people who achieve extraordinary results are not those who avoid criticism. They're those who pursue worthwhile goals, despite inevitable criticism. Your learning accelerates because you're no longer avoiding situations where you might look incompetent or foolish. You can ask questions without worrying about appearing ignorant. You can attempt new skills without needing to be immediately perfect. You can seek feedback without taking criticism personally. This openness to being temporarily bad at things allows you to become permanently good at them. The third benefit is the dramatic improvement in your relationships across all areas of life. When you stop people-pleasing, you paradoxically become more attractive to high-quality people while becoming less attractive to low-quality people. This natural selection process improves your entire social ecosystem. Romantic relationships become more passionate and authentic because you're no longer walking on eggshells or suppressing your true self. Professional relationships become more respectful because colleagues and leaders recognize your integrity and independent thinking. Friendships become deeper because they're based on genuine connection rather than mutual people-pleasing. You also develop the ability to end relationships that don't serve you without the agonizing guilt that approval seekers experience. When you're not desperate for everyone's acceptance, you can maintain standards for how you expect to be treated. This leads to a social circle composed entirely of people who appreciate and support your authentic self. The fourth benefit is the massive increase in your energy levels. People-pleasing is exhausting because it requires constant monitoring of others' reactions, careful calibration of your words and actions, and suppression of your natural responses. When you stop performing and start being yourself, you reclaim all that wasted energy. This energy return is often dramatic and immediate. People frequently report feeling more vibrant, motivated, and alive within weeks of committing to authenticity. The mental and emotional resources that were previously devoted to impression management become available for pursuing goals, building relationships, and enjoying life. You also sleep better because you're no longer lying awake replaying conversations and worrying about what people think. Your stress levels decrease because you're no longer living in constant fear of judgment or rejection. Your overall health improves because chronic stress and emotional suppression take significant tolls on physical well-being. The fifth benefit is the development of unshakable confidence and self-respect. When you consistently choose your values over others' opinions, you prove to yourself that you can be trusted to stand up for what matters. This builds genuine self-respect that can't be taken away by external circumstances. This internal confidence is qualitatively different from the fragile ego boost that comes from external validation. It's stable, reliable, and independent of other people's opinions or life circumstances. You develop what psychologists call unconditional self-regard, the ability to maintain positive feelings about yourself regardless of temporary failures or criticisms. This confidence becomes magnetic, attracting opportunities and people who are drawn to your self-assurance and authenticity. Leaders, romantic partners, and collaborators are naturally attracted to people who know their own worth and live from their own center rather than seeking constant validation. The sixth benefit is the discovery of your true potential and authentic interests. When you're people-pleasing, you often suppress talents, interests, and aspects of your personality that don't fit others' expectations. When you stop caring what people think, you can explore these hidden parts of yourself and discover capabilities you never knew you had. Many people discover artistic talents they buried because someone criticized their early attempts. Others uncover entrepreneurial abilities they suppressed because family members valued security over risk-taking. Still, others rediscover intellectual curiosity they abandoned because peers made fun of their interests. This self-discovery process often leads to career changes, new hobbies, different friend groups, and completely unexpected life directions. You might find yourself pursuing opportunities that the approval-seeking version of you never would have considered, often with remarkable success because they align with your authentic nature. The seventh benefit is the positive impact you have on others, especially those who are still trapped in approval-seeking patterns. When you live authentically, you give others permission to do the same. Your example becomes a beacon of possibility for people who are afraid to be themselves. This influence often extends to your children, who learn from your example that they don't need to sacrifice their authenticity for acceptance. Your colleagues see that it's possible to be successful while maintaining integrity. Your friends observe that genuine happiness comes from being true to yourself rather than pleasing others. The ripple effects can be profound and far-reaching. People who are inspired by your authenticity go on to inspire others, creating expanding circles of authentic living that contribute to a more honest and courageous culture overall. The eighth, and perhaps most significant benefit, is the alignment between your external life and internal truth. When you stop performing for others, your life begins to reflect who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. This alignment creates a sense of integration and wholeness that is the foundation of genuine happiness. You wake up excited about your days because you're living your values rather than sacrificing them. You feel proud of your choices because they reflect your authentic desires rather than others' expectations. You experience peace because there's no longer a war between your public persona and private reality. This alignment also creates what psychologists call flow states more frequently. When your actions match your authentic nature, tasks become easier and more enjoyable. You feel energized rather than drained by your daily activities, because they express, rather than suppress, your true self. The compound effect of all these benefits creates an upward spiral where authenticity becomes increasingly rewarding, making it easier to maintain and expand over time. Each authentic choice creates positive results that reinforce your commitment to living freely, making approval-seeking seem not just unnecessary, but actively harmful to your well-being and success. Chapter 15. You now stand at a crossroads that will define the rest of your life. On one path lies the familiar territory of approval-seeking, people-pleasing, and living according to others' expectations. It's the path of safety, conformity, and slow, spiritual death. On the other path lies the unknown territory of authentic living, where you become the author of your own story and the architect of your own destiny. Most people will choose the familiar path. They'll read this information, feel inspired for a moment, and then gradually drift back into the comfortable prison of caring too much about what others think. They'll convince themselves that their situation is different, that their circumstances are too complex, that the risks are too high. They'll wait for the perfect moment that never comes and die with their authentic selves locked away forever. But you're not most people. You're here because something inside you refuses to accept a life of quiet desperation. You're here because you're tired of being a supporting character in your own story. You're here because you know, deep in your bones, that you were meant for something more than endless performance, for an audience that doesn't really care about you anyway. The choice you make right now will echo through every aspect of your future. Choose authenticity, and 5 years from now, you'll look back on this moment as the turning point when your real life finally began. Choose people-pleasing, and 5 years from now, you'll be in exactly the same place you are now, perhaps a little more tired, a little more bitter, a little more disconnected from who you really are. The transformation begins with a decision, but decisions without action are just wishful thinking. You cannot think your way into authentic living. You must act your way into it. Every moment presents opportunities to choose authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, growth over safety. These choices, accumulated over time, become the substance of your character and the foundation of your legacy. Start today with small acts of authenticity. Express an opinion you've been hiding. Say no to something you don't want to do. Share an interest others might not understand. Wear something that reflects your style rather than what you think others expect. Take a small risk that moves you toward a goal you care about. These actions might feel terrifying at first, because your nervous system is calibrated for approval-seeking. Your heart might race. Your palms might sweat. Your mind might flood with worst-case scenarios. Feel these sensations fully. Acknowledge them as normal responses to growth, and act authentically anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's action in spite of fear. As you begin to choose authenticity consistently, you'll notice that the fears that seemed so overwhelming rarely materialize. People generally respond better to authenticity than your anxiety predicts. Those who respond poorly to your genuine self reveal themselves as people whose opinions shouldn't matter to you anyway. You'll discover that the cost of being disliked by the wrong people is far less than the cost of being liked for being someone you're not. The process requires patience because neural rewiring takes time. Your brain has been practicing approval-seeking patterns for years or decades, and these pathways won't disappear overnight. But every authentic choice strengthens new neural pathways while weakening old ones. Every time you choose your values over others' opinions, you become more of who you're meant to be. You'll face resistance, not just from your own conditioning, but from people in your life who benefit from your people-pleasing behavior. Family members who enjoyed having someone who never challenged them. Friends who liked having a companion who always accommodated their preferences. Colleagues who appreciated working with someone who never rocked the boat. Some of these people will adjust to your authenticity and respect you more for it. Others will reveal that they were never really in relationship with you. They were in relationship with your usefulness to them. Let them go. The space they leave in your life will be filled by people who appreciate your authentic self. People who value honesty over agreeability. People who want to know the real you, rather than a performed version. These relationships will be deeper, more satisfying, and more energizing than the superficial connections based on people-pleasing. Remember that authenticity is not about being perfect or having it all figured out. It's about being real, being honest about your struggles as well as your strengths, your questions as well as your convictions. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the courage to be seen as you are, rather than as you think you should be. The world needs your authentic contribution. There are problems that need your unique perspective, innovations that require your particular combination of skills and experiences, relationships that need your specific way of caring. But none of this can emerge while you're hiding behind a mask of acceptability. Every great achievement in human history came from people who cared more about their vision than about universal approval. Every scientific breakthrough, artistic masterpiece, and social advancement was created by individuals who were willing to be criticized, misunderstood, and initially rejected by those who preferred the status quo. You have the same choice they had: safety or significance, acceptance or achievement, conformity or contribution. The path of authenticity is not easier than the path of people-pleasing, but it's infinitely more rewarding. It's the difference between existing and living, between surviving and thriving, between being a copy of someone else and being an original version of yourself. The time for preparation is over. The time for excuses has ended. The time for transformation is now. Not when you feel ready. Not when circumstances are perfect. Not when you've overcome all your fears. Now, while you still remember the pain of living someone else's life, now, while you still feel the fire of possibility burning in your chest, now, before the familiar patterns reassert, control, and convince you to wait a little longer. Your authentic life is waiting for you on the other side of fear. Your real relationships are waiting for you on the other side of people-pleasing. Your true potential is waiting for you on the other side of caring what others think. The only question that remains is, are you ready to stop living for everyone else and start living for yourself? The answer to that question will determine everything else.